Hey there, let's talk about Have a Nice Death, which is not only one of the moodiest ways of telling someone to piss off, but also the type of roguelite that... Wait, what's that? Oh, there goes my short review without ranting. Well, let me be a bit nice before being an ass. Have a Nice Death is a decent game. I kinda recommend it. In a sense, it is Dead Cells meets Nightmare Before Christmas meets The Office. Which sounds great, but heads up, it's the decaf version. The art style is going to grab you from the beginning if you like spooky cutesy stuff. The opening intro is a sweet animation with a pinch of grim fandango on it that will present the premise of the game. A universe where death built a massive company to help dealing with all the, well, deaths, which with time turned the Reaper into a glorified pencil pusher, a shadow of itself on a company that's becoming more and more corrupt as the solution to the first issue becomes the next problem. It is an extremely dark and humorous context, well, it should be. Which brings us back to my rant. Let me put things in perspective. Someone down the line decided that a game called Have a Nice Death, where you play as Death, who is suffering from burnout in the land of the dead, needs to have a disclaimer about it having death and burnout related imagery, which is kinda...
Well, duh.
Although that by itself would be fine. Well intentioned even. A bit naive if they expect that someone thick enough to buy this game while being triggered by death would be the kind of person that reads content warnings. And a bit counterproductive, as the current available scientific research shows that content warnings don't appear to help anybody, but seem to make people more sensitive instead. Which makes sense, because if you put a curves ahead sign, people are actually going to look out for any curve. There are two types of content warnings that are actually helpful. The first one being when a game can trigger a health issue, like epilepsy, where it's kinda nice to tell people who suffer from it to avoid playing the game or to at least put some pillows in the floor just in case. The second type applies to media with a very deceiving presentation or art style, especially when something looks childish but is actually
a little bit spicy.
In whatever sense. I would even argue that stating a difficulty especially on physical media could be helpful, because maybe grandpa doesn't want his granddaughter to develop NES-style trauma by buying her the wrong kind of game. But I digress. What irks me is this part, where they claim that the dark humor and satire of the game doesn't represent any of them, which makes me wonder, how does that even work?
Hey,
Hi?
you look like an asshole who likes dark humor.
Well, fair enough, I guess.
Would you mind writing a game for us that goes against our values?
Did I forget to take my medication again? Yeah, mate, you think you did. It feels wrong whenever a creator tries to distance themselves from their own creation. And this is what happens when a society listens to a tiny but very loud minority of demented beings who believe that instead of having to adapt to reality, reality should bend to their sensibilities, usually screaming through social media or even evolving to become professionally offended as media critics. I know, that was in bad taste. I apologize. Whales are magnificent beings that deserve all my respect. The issue is that this makes many creators scared about being deemed as offensive and being cancelled. But if you're a creator, let me show you something. This is your art. Well, it's actually my dog's rear end. It's a metaphor, just roll with it. This is your art, and this is what happens to it whenever you start worrying about not offending anyone. It suffers. So if you're a creator, please do your own thing without compromising on the need of drama others might have. It's time we went back to assuming that people are smart enough and especially responsible to vet the content they or their children consume. Because if we keep building a society around the demands of the easily offended, we'll have a humorless, talentless and bland society. Not an inoffensive one, mind you, because offense is taken, and if we keep giving power to the ones that constantly scream,
"How dare you!"
they'll keep finding reasons to be offended. The fact is that there is not a single piece of interesting art that isn't offensive. Anything that has a spark will create passionate reactions in both directions. And if anyone thinks they can listen to modern sensibilities while making something good, Let me ask you this. If Amazon, with the rights to one of the most beloved franchises ever, and a budget of around $1 billion, still ended up with a third by listening to the professionally offended, well, what do you think are your chances? If you try to make everybody happy, you end up making everybody indifferent. Besides, believing that you can appeal to everybody at the same time is rather narcissistic, which brings us back to Have a Nice Death. The reason I'm grumbling so much about an inconsequent content warning is because I saw it after playing for a while, as this is usually me during game startup. And it answered questions that came to mind while I was playing, like why the heck did they choose such a dark and cynic theme to do nothing with it story-wise? Where did the acid humor of the trailers, the comics, the intro, the descriptions of the enemies go? The whole game feels like a child trying to tell a very dark joke when suddenly his mother appears, sleep already at hand, so they had to change it into something cute midway, which doesn't really work. Or what probably happened, that someone who had dark humor designed the concept and then people who hate it had to tone it down, so we end up with dialogues where the spiciest jokes are about drinking too much coffee, eating too many pretzels, or farting. But if you read some enemy descriptions or check external media, you see what the game could have been. You can really feel that the satire of the game does not represent us, and maybe they should have gone for something nicer. As things being what they are, I ended up skipping dialogues, which I don't even do in Pokemon. So consider all that a way of saying not to expect much of the story of this game, which given that it's a roguelite, it's not that bad of a deal. Although games like Hades show how good writing is extremely important to keep the attention of the player. So let's talk about how the rest of the game fares. But before that...
Content warning. This video includes opinions that might be offensive for sensitive audiences. No animals were hurt in the making of this video. The opinions of the author do not represent the opinions of the author. In case of...
I couldn't help myself. As I said before, the art is on point. Animations, although few and far in between, are dynamic and expressive. If they made a well-written cartoon with this art, I'd gladly watch it. The whole game comes in a low saturation blend of gritty and mostly grey backgrounds that show the theme of each level with small details and tones that change the feel of each without disrupting the atmosphere. The way in which models are portrayed is quite smart. They took notes from Hollow Knight while making Death. The head being the same type of white ball with two black circles that works great as a focal point, because our brains are designed to go at anything that looks like eyes. They went a step further and removed the outline of the model, leaving a very clean look that works as a contrast point against the more detailed backgrounds. It's basically the same effect older cartoons had, where you could clearly see what parts were animated even before they started moving. Things get even better whenever we attack and flashes of neon-colored energy flow from our scythe or scales, destroying the monotony and giving us all the information we need during fights. Normal enemies look fine, although some are very samey. But bosses? Bosses are the icing of the cake, with very distinct looks and animations. They are the best part of the game. Music and effects are fine, good even. The OST is made up from a bunch of songs that mix a cartoony feel with a tang of spookiness. Functional, but nothing you'll make an effort to listen out of the game, unless you need some funky Halloween music for whatever reason. Gameplay? Here is where things become a bit more touch and go. Some games try to reinvent the wheel, others, well, not so much. Which is not a critique, as many of the best games are made this way. Just don't expect anything innovative. Controls are sharp, and if you ever played basically any modern action platformer, you'll feel right at home in 2 seconds and a half. We have jump, dash, a basic attack with varying combos, a stronger attack that's a great way of getting hit, health consumables, and 2 skills. Our main attack will be determined by the choice of scythe at the beginning of each run. There are 7 scythes, with different bonuses and combos. All of them feel distinct and will spice our gameplay, although some are better than others. Skills? Heads up to those of you who enjoyed balanced games. This one is balanced with the same care as the wealth distribution in Dubai. Skills and passive bonuses, which are called curses here, go from utter garbage to almost broken, and this is by design. Here are 2 cloak skills of the same tier. What would you choose? The shuriken with 4 charges, mediocre range, the same damage efficiency as throwing peanuts to a grizzly bear, and a special skill that made Buddha cry, or a bow with 4 times the damage output, homing arrows with almost infinite range, a decent special skill, and a secondary skill that increases the ammo of all other skills. Oh yeah, I forgot, we can't choose. And there are tiers of skills, which brings the difference to another level, not only in power, but because I hope you don't like any of the high tier skills, as you'll probably only see them once during a full playthrough, and that's if you're lucky. Skills come in 2 flavors, cloak attacks and codex attacks, which is short for special weapons and magic. Special weapons are mostly straightforward skills, with a cooldown between attacks or between stacks of ammunition. They generally can be aimed or have secondary attacks and have alternate attacks while in the air. Magic, on the other hand, let me put things this way. This is a universe in which Harry Potter chose a gun. Magic has problems. For starters, it's quirkier, often harder to use with less predictable attacks. It uses mana, and the good ones also have a cooldown, and usually gets ruined if you use it in the air. Some magic skills are useless or even harmful. And since magic has an extra cooldown in the form of mana, if we carry 2 magical skills and mana runs out, we have to wait. Whereas if you use 2 special weapons or a mix, you can use one, and while it goes on cooldown, use the other. And the game favors focusing on one path instead of mixing them, so that's a missed opportunity. Not only that, on every run you can improve cloak-related curses 4 times, and only 2 times for magic. For a developer called Magic Design Studios, they really seem to like magic as much as they like their own satire. And let's not talk about curses, because there, the balance is worse, way worse. Which brings us to the gameplay loop. Our goal is to put the sorrows, which are the bosses, back in line so Death can go on vacation. And the structure of the game is as follows. We have 4 levels that follow different themes related to the most common death causes, with 2 forks in the road that will improve either our weapon or magic tree, according to what we choose. Each level consists on 6 stages, one of which will be a shop or a forge where we can improve our skills and scythe. The last stage will always be the corresponding sorrow. Stages are chosen from a list, which only changes the reward, as all of them are always easy, simple randomized maps with mobs and a couple ambushes, and probably the worst style of secret rooms I've ever seen. The only exceptions being the shop, the forge, optional mini-bosses called Thanagers, and special time stages. Avoid special time stages, as not only they can be failed, they usually have worse rewards than a normal stage. Bosses are the fun part. They hit hard, they hit fast, and they come in 2 flavors. Thanagers, which are optional mini-bosses, that can be actually harder than many of the main ones. And then we have Sorrows, which are the main bosses, generally bigger, fancier, and have 2 faces. If you like boss fights, you are going to really wish that this game was a boss rush. So we go through the 4 levels and give Death its deserved vacation, right? Wrong. We die. So we have to go through the game again. And don't expect any changes apart from some aesthetic faff on the first level and a new mini-boss. The rest stays exactly the same. Only this time we have 2 more levels, natural disasters and time, with harder bosses, especially time, as we have to beat his Thanager and time itself back to back. But what happens if we do so? Is it time for a vacation? Nope. And by now we are experiencing firsthand how budget limitations and cutting corners would feel in the land of the dead, as we have to go through the whole game again, but this time picking 3 items that we won't miss unless we are blind, but everything else stays exactly the same. If we pick the items and beat all the levels, we'll meet the final boss, which I won't spoil who is lore-wise in case you want to give it a go. But let's say that if time was a pain, this one is even harder, but not as hard as justifying to yourself going through the game several more times to learn its patterns. Luckily, this is a short game, so it won't overstay its welcome for most people. But keep in mind that this is the kind of game where the first hours are a blast, the mid hours are kind of meh, and the final ones can become a bit dreadful. So as a conclusion, Have a Nice Death has all the ingredients of a great game, but it is turned into something lesser due to some weird decisions. A great setting and tone that's completely unused. A decent amount of skills, with tons of variety that gets ruined by terrible balance and a tier system that will stop the player from enjoying the most interesting ones, as you'll be lucky if you even find them once during your playthrough. Amazing bosses that get watered down by making the player go through lazy levels without any new mechanic to make them look or feel different. You know when you want to like something, but it's not completely there? it is one of those games for me. So, do I recommend it? Well, if you love action platformers and roguelites, already have all the great ones and are craving for more, sure, it will scratch that itch, although I would get it on a sale. I would also keep an eye on its developers, as they might drop some good games in the future. With that said, remember to make art that might be offensive, to use all the buttons down here for whatever you might want to express. Make my day by subscribing or write in detail how I'm completely wrong about everything. I will answer. Be it as it may, thank you for watching and I hope you have a nice day.